What's good, my dear language learning masters? And welcome to Natural Languages and welcome to a new episode of the Language Import podcast. And today I'm gonna have Dustin on the show, and he's American, but he's a French and Spanish teacher in a high school in Maine, in Northeast, And well, he's gonna tell us about his experience learning French and Spanish, also the difference between teaching the traditional way when he started out as a teacher versus teaching with comprehensible input, storytelling, the difference it made in his own journey, but obviously in his students as well, and much more. So yeah, hope you enjoy it, and let's get right into it. Let's go. All right. Hi, Dustin.
Hello.
And well, it's a pleasure to see you again and to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. I was actually thinking the other day. So we first met at the conference in Agen, and that was at least 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, I believe it was 2016. If I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
And I've only been to that conference just once, but like the connections I made there continue to this date. So it's very cool.
Yeah, it's important as well. The power of having a community around you, and that's one of my goals with the podcast as well. Just to sort of bring more people in, as many as possible. Okay.
Absolutely.
So yeah, let's just get started as usual with your experience with with languages as a teacher, as a language learner yourself, whatever you have in mind or whatever you think it can be useful for people. Just feel free.
You got it. First, my experience as a language student, I guess, obviously began in high school here in the United States, and then I continue it at the university level, and then went abroad and learned a lot of French and Spanish when I was abroad, living in France and living in Spain. And my father was a French professor. And so I kind of been exposed to other languages early on as a young kid. And then I began teaching right after college, right after the university. And but I started, the traditional way, kind of, the grammar approach and conjugation charts, huge vocabulary lists, memorize it, and things like that. And doing a lot of it in English. And obviously, I didn't know much anyway because I was just starting out as a teacher. But it didn't. I guess it just didn't feel right, and I wasn't getting a whole lot from my students. So then, after the first 3 to 5 years of doing that, might have been 3. Hopefully, it was just 3 and not more than 5. And I went to a conference with the great Susie Gross, and she, a huge comprehensible input guru as she was, and presented about this. And I was like, yep, that's what I'm doing. Let's throw away the traditional stuff. And we're going with a comprehensible input approach and going with it. So that was after my first few years of teaching. And then ever since then, I think I'm on year 18 or 19 total. So it's been a good 15 years of teaching with comprehensible input at the high school level, and mostly Spanish, but French as well. And it's been an awesome adventure, and it's not just awesome, but fun. And being able to interact with my students, finding out about them, it's just been really in the target language, and it's just been really fun. And there is no way I would go back to traditional teaching. And I believe that comprehensible input and acquisition-driven instruction is so powerful, and it's just been great. So that's where I'm at.
Cool. Yeah, it's just the way it works, right? It's not that we're coming out with some crazy stuff here.
No, right. It's not quite revolutionary. I mean, I think about how how everybody learns their first language when they're 1 year, babies, and then growing up, and that's how it's done. And I've always thought that, parents are the best language teachers because they have a 100% success rate, and they do it by comprehensible input and, repeated exposure to the language, and they, with images and gestures, and they're doing it all right. And and that's how it works. And no matter how old a language student is, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and toys, here's a car, look at the car, it's one, comprehensible input, right?
Absolutely. And then throw in, some personalized questions and make it meaningful, and then, throw in the stories, and it's and then it sticks in the brain.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. And did you feel the difference in yourself? You kind of touched on it already, but in your students, like from your last year with the traditional way and your first year, like could you see it right away? Or
I could see it right away, and more. I think the big thing, or one of the big things, was more interaction. It wasn't with traditional. For me, it was I was in the front talking to my students. Now with comprehensive input, I'm talking with my students, and there's more of a two-way street, and there's just way more interaction. And so I think that's been the biggest difference. And then another thing that I have done is in my classroom, there's only chairs. There's no desks or anything. And that also has really helped, not just in the classroom, not just with the atmosphere of the classroom, but with the goals of the classroom, making it even more interactive with just chairs. So, we're kind of like hanging out. We're hanging out in French or Spanish, and we're talking about each other, talking about what's going on, talking about, whatever's on my screen. If it's talking about a picture or something or a story, we're just hanging out, having a good time.
Yeah, and for I guess for the most part about things that they're interested in, right? As opposed to just, not just exercises with no context whatsoever, but even if there are little stories within those textbooks, they're just so impersonal, or just someone going to the restaurant, like
Right, exactly. And I always feel so lucky that I don't think there's many other subjects in school that where a teacher can do that. Like feel very fortunate and lucky where I get to personalize my input and what we're doing, and talk about them, what they're going to do, for example, this weekend or something like that. And it's just, it's one proof that languages are not like any other subject at all.
Right. But even then, I have a funny feeling that whatever the subject, we could probably throw some things in that would resemble what we're doing with comprehensible input. Like, to give you a crazy example, not a crazy example, but one that just came to my mind the other day. I was thinking about a history teacher, for example. So a history teacher in Spain, as opposed to, instead of talking about what most people talk about, just, dates and there was a battle here. I was just thinking about it, like randomly, like, why don't you ask the kids? So just imagine in Spain, the Civil War, for example, imagine you bumped into someone who you knew before, but you're on opposite sides of it. What would you do? And so you're making it personal, and while explaining the context of the situation or what the things you want to talk about, right? They're just like one example that came to my mind the other day. So I have a funny feeling that obviously in high schools and so on, it depends a lot on how much freedom you have, right? Because I remember you telling me in France that you were lucky in that sense, that you have a lot of freedom if you compare yourself with other teachers, probably, right?
Right.
But, so that might be an issue, but I have a funny feeling that you can do it with any subject, and you as a teacher are gonna have way more fun, and students, same thing. Yeah.
Way more fun and just more success, and in the end, and just a
Right.
more engaging class.
Right. Because when it comes to languages, there, you're talking about things that you're interested in the target language, but because they're interested in the topic itself, they're not, quote unquote, really paying attention to the language, right? And the history example that I just mentioned, because they're thinking about the situation, what they do in that situation, they're actually learning about the events that happen, the history, without even realizing, right? Which is what happens with languages.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the best things, like that subconscious learning when it happens and you don't even know it. It's like, it's so cool.
Right. Yeah. And when it comes to you as a language student, you mentioned your experience with French and Spanish, but like in hindsight, looking back, like did you study? You said you studied in high school and then lived in France and Spain, but where were you when you first went to France? Like, what was your knowledge of the language, and what do you think made the real difference when it comes to you acquiring the language?
So when I went to France as a student, I had some background in French from school. It was a little bit more grammar based. But I had this foundation, and then living there in France, not quite immersion. Like there's a lot of talk about immersion, whether it's good or bad. Not quite that, but just it was. I had all the background French, and then at some point when I was living in France, boom, it came out, and not immediately.
Right.
But then it started to really pour out of my mouth, and yes, the school helped, but living in France expedited the process.
Right.
And I think now, if I had learned via comprehensible input in school, then I think that would have happened like earlier. Like I would have been able to speak it earlier.
Right.
And if I had gone to France with the comprehensible input classroom prior, it would have come out a little bit sooner. And there's no rush to speak in a second language, and you do it when you're ready. But I had but living there just made I don't know, it made it all better.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking that probably because of your French background, it was enough for you to understand what was going on, when you were around people, right? So and because of that, you got a lot of comprehensible input, and then you started speaking, right?
Right, exactly. Now my Spanish is a different story, because I didn't take Spanish until college, not in high school. I started taking it in college, and then lived in Spain just in the summer. I'm still a Spanish student, really. I'm still learning, it's still acquiring the Spanish, even though that's what I teach most of the time, and at all levels. And so I had a little bit less Spanish before living in Spain compared to my French, but it still helped living in Spain, and being there. And hearing it, seeing it, but the big thing is, to acquire the language, you have to understand it. So, so if you go live in a country and you don't know any of the language when you're going there, or very little, and everybody's speaking to you in that language, it's not really gonna, it's not gonna, you're not gonna acquire it as quickly. It's gonna be a lot harder.
It's just noise, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. Just noise. Yep.
You're listening to the language, but it's not really helping because you don't understand, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like going in one ear and going right out the other, and nothing's processing in between.
Right. That's where your previous contact with it really helped.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
And yeah, I was thinking, Spain. You probably, and That's a good thing about Spain that I always talk about that because in general, I don't know what your experience was, but in general, people are not really good with English overall. So because as opposed to Poland where I live, where I decided to learn the language because I wanted to, I love languages and I thought, why not, but I don't really need it because I can, with young people, especially, they, to a different level, but they all speak English.
Mhm.
And, with just enough to get by in the supermarket or whatever. I didn't need to learn Polish, right? But I just decided to. But the good thing about Spain for foreigners is, you're probably gonna end up learning the language because you don't have English to sort of bail you out, right?
Right, right, yeah, yeah. You're almost kind of forced to, because right.
Like because sometimes I talk to foreigners and they're like, but nobody speaks English in Spanish. I'm like, that's good for you.
Hey, yes, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't know if, was it the same way in France or did you find any differences?
Yeah, it was similar in France, and when I was there, I was living with a family, and they knew that one of my goals living there was to, get better in French. So they would speak French to me, and and I would, take courses in the French university in French, and so yeah, it would. But similar though, if it's and like you can and English is so much around that for a lot of people it can bail you out, and you can kind of, I guess, cheat the system. And if you want to, and use English all the time, but that doesn't help you get better at a second language. So
yeah. I always wonder what this is like. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of variables, but I don't know. One of my theories is, in countries where the language is thought to be like a strong language, like French or Spanish, or that we tend not to learn other languages, or you guys in the US or in the UK, right? As opposed to, I don't know. I mean, like I said, there are other variables, but I'm thinking about Scandinavian countries that the languages are not so, I was going to say popular, but
right,
I don't know what's the word, but they're not as widely spoken as English, Spanish, or French. They tend to learn other languages, and I've seen it here in Poland or other Central European countries like Romania, or that they tend to speak more languages.
Right, exactly. Yep, very true.
Yeah, if there's any other explanation for it, but anyway.
I know that's beyond my knowledge and my research.
Yeah, I like to think about those things, but obviously just throwing out opinions.
Yep.
And and are you learning other languages now, or would you like to learn another language?
Not currently. It'd be nice to. I know just a little bit of Italian, so it'd be nice to expand that. But no, not currently learning any others. Mandarin would be very interesting to learn. But no, it's time is one thing. I haven't had as much free time to do it. But I mean, I'm still learning French and Spanish as we go along. So from films, or listening to radio stations online, or watching TV programs in French or Spanish, and I'm still learning that. So I will always be a language learner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can always get better. That's
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
but and that's a good thing because I have students often that ask me how to say certain things in Spanish, and a lot of the times it's like words that I would rarely even use in English, and I'm like, I don't know, let's check the dictionary. So it's good to also reveal that as a language teacher, I'm still learning as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's always words are gonna come out that you have no idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Some like far-reached word. I'm like, we'll look it up.
Yeah, and the good thing about where you're at with French and Spanish is, even though you can always get better and you can already communicate, is once you get to that level, you have access to really interesting and complex resources, as opposed to when you're starting out with a language, right? Which because sometimes people struggle a little bit at the beginning because, it's just harder to find comprehensible input, right? As opposed to now, where you're at with French or Spanish, that you can pretty much watch any type of series or listen to podcasts or read books or whatever it is. That's when, the whole thing gets interesting, right? Because even if you're not communicating in the language, you can still enjoy your journey, by watching things. Or
Yep, exactly. And it also goes to show that, like the high frequency verbs and words that, you can say so much with just those, like 100 high frequency words. You can have great conversations with it. And then to advance your proficiency, you get those extra, words that you can add in that aren't quite high frequency, but that just helps you build your proficiency and makes you be able to speak better and not have to describe a word that you don't know how to say and work around it. You can say it, but that's still a good skill too. So
yeah, and that's still okay, because again, what you need is comprehensible input in order to get better, right? So you can sort of find your way around first when you don't know how to say it, just enough to keep the conversation going, so the other person keeps talking to you and you keep getting comprehensible input.
Exactly. Yeah. One thing I should do is read more. I should read more Spanish, read more Spanish novels, and I should do that. So I'm pretty good at during the summer reading a couple of French novels, but I should read more Spanish ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that helps. And again, another interesting resource.
Yep, absolutely. And reading helps so much, and with acquiring a language, and the more you read, the better you are at writing, and the more you hear, the better you are at speaking it. So it just takes so much input, that takes the flood of input to be able to say just a little bit or be able to write just a little bit. It takes so much coming at you to make that happen.
Right. And what do you think is the connection between reading and speaking? Meaning that, so we know we need to listen to the language in order to communicate, and we need to read in order to be able to write, right? But do you think there's a connection, like after having gotten oral comprehensible input, do you think reading is going to help you sort of structure the language in your brain on a subconscious way, right? I'm not trying to control the process, because that's something I've been thinking about lately. Like, is it only helping you when it comes to writing, or is it also helping, or is it making oral comprehensible input richer? You know what I mean? Like,
I think it's all connected. I mean, the reading, I think it does help speaking. I mean, the reading is a little more connected to help you with writing, but I think it can help you speak better as well. You might be reading something and come across a word you haven't seen before, and however way you do it, you figure out what it means, and that word might stick with you, and then you'll be able to use it in a conversation. And you can see the structure in reading, because when you're listening to it, obviously you can't see it, and you can't see the spelling or anything too. And in some languages, like French, where you see the word, but that might not be how it's pronounced.
all right.
But you hear it, it helps too. In Spanish, it's a little more obvious with the pronunciation, but in French, but I think the reading, the listening, speaking, writing, it's all connected. It's all language. So yeah. I would say the more you read, the better you are going to be overall in speaking and writing. And the more you listen to a language that you understand, just the better you are going to be at all those skills. So.
Right. Yeah, because we tend to connect listening to then speaking and reading to then writing, which makes sense, obviously. But yeah, I agree with that. I actually, like, I don't know, you may have acquired some some part of the language through listening, but then when you read it, you sort of extract the language in your head, first of all, like I said, but then you get to understand words that you wouldn't otherwise if it was just listening, right? Because of having the time to process it, right? Because in the conversation, you don't really have the time to process things. Um, but when you're reading, you sort of have more time for it. And
Yep. Here's the question that I just popped in my head. I wonder if the level of your language depends on that. Like if you're just starting out learning or acquiring a second language, if you read it, is that going to make you better at speaking, or like initially, or is it after 2 years, 3 years, whatever of acquiring a second language? Is it at that point where when you read it, you're going to become even better at speaking it when that's more connected? I don't know. That's that question popped in my head. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any studies on that. Probably are somewhere.
Yeah. Good. That's a good question. Yeah, I was thinking about it from my own perspective as a language student, and I tend to start reading when I don't know. I mean, as soon as possible. First of all, because I love it.
Yeah.
But then, when I understand the topic or when I understand the message, and then I'm not paying attention to form at all, right? Because I tried comic books, for example, when I'm a beginner, because I think that's something I might be able to understand, depending on the language, of course, right? As opposed to a normal book, because you have the images and the vocabulary is a little bit more simple. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. In my case, as soon as I can, but sometimes the reason I said that is because sometimes we might try to force the issue a little bit and start reading when things might not be comprehensible yet. And what that's going to do for you is you're going to start focusing on the structures, on the words. You're going to start focusing on form as opposed to just enjoying the book you're reading, right? Which is what happens when you actually understand most of it. So I guess there's not a definite answer. It depends on the person and on the language as well, because probably for you that already speak French and Spanish and English, of course, you probably be, I mean, not probably, 100%, you'll be able to access books in Italian way sooner than books in Mandarin Chinese, right?
Yes, most likely.
So yeah, the language matters. Your native language, the similarities between languages, the languages you already speak. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. But but anybody, no matter what your first language is, anybody can acquire a second language or a third language, or it doesn't matter who you are. It's anybody can do it. So then another thing is, another thing that is, I think, definite is, you have that natural order. First you hear it, and then pretty soon after you read it, and then at some point you're gonna speak it and write it. Like the output, the speaking and writing comes after you get all that listening and the reading. But yeah, like we said earlier, it's all connected, and and all of that input and is all very beneficial.
Absolutely.
And all connected.
And you're enjoying the process. So that's important in the long term. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The fun part and the enjoyment. You're absolutely right. Like that is super important. Super important.
Yeah, because some people are more motivated than others, but if you're not enjoying it, sooner or later you're gonna end up giving that.
Correct. So it's important for us to keep that fun going in the classroom, and which can be challenging at times because obviously for me, I'm in a school setting, so a lot of people don't like to go to school. So I always try to make my class not like school at all. I try to, it's Spanish is not. I think I said earlier, Spanish is not like other subjects, so I try to keep my class different, and it looks different, right, with only chairs, and then B, it sounds different, and C, we're doing more interactive, fun things, and but you're right. I'm glad you brought that up. Keeping that fun and enjoyment is, that's the thing. Like you got to have that.
Yeah, and with your students, like if they're talking about their life, the things they're interested in, it's just going to be interesting for them, and they're not used to it. They're not used to be heard for the most part. So that's even, you take it to another level, but that's a deeper topic.
Correct.
Cool. So if the languages you mentioned, like Italian and Mandarin Chinese, how would you go about it if you were to start with them? Obviously there are different cases, so what would you start with?
I would first start trying to find a virtual opportunity to acquire those languages, done through comprehensible input or acquisition driven. I would do that first. Since I know a little bit of Italian, I would probably I would look for a very basic Italian reading that I can understand, and do that. With Mandarin, I'd be starting pretty much from zero. So I would need someone. Like I wouldn't go and do like a computer program where it's just me and listening to something online or a recording or something, or using an app or something on a phone. I would be more apt to and more wanting to be with someone else or be in a kind of a class kind of thing, or and then go from there. For me, it wouldn't be as successful if I was just trying to do it by myself. It's with Mandarin, that wouldn't work. Italian maybe, because I have a little bit of background, but still it wouldn't be as effective. It would take longer for me to do it by myself than it would be to be in a CI classroom setting.
Right. Yeah, because in the classroom there's input directed at you, as opposed to just trying to find the specific resources that you can understand. Right. Yeah, that's probably a good answer.
Yeah.
I myself, I like doing it on my own because it gives me control, and I can watch, I can consume content in 5-6 different languages. But if you start with a language like Mandarin Chinese from scratch, is going to be a struggle.
Yeah, that'd be different. And so it's always nice to be able to speak and talk with someone, and they're able to answer you back.
Right. And with French and Spanish, were there any resources that you started consuming after your initial experience in France and Spain, or was it just immersion that helped you get to that point? Like, were you doing anything else besides that, besides real life, or?
Immersion, I think, was the big thing. And reading and listening to it. Just trying to and keeping the exposure to French and Spanish going. And beyond what I do in my classes. Obviously, what I do in my classes is at my very comfort level, and I know all the words, and I can understand it 100%, but also try to find ways to bring it up a level, and read something or listen to something that is just I like it, it's interesting to me, but it's there's a few words that I don't know yet, and that way I can pick them up. But so, and watching TV shows, that's the great thing now with all this online stuff. You can watch all kinds of things online, and whether that's on Netflix or YouTube or any of those streaming things, you can watch all kinds of stuff and keep that exposure to the language going. So, and which is important as a language teacher to keep that going and to always look for ways to improve your own language.
Yeah, because that way, yeah, I keep telling people, like, even if it's just half an hour a day, which, I mean, we're all busy or whatever you want, but I think if you really want to get better, half an hour a day is not that crazy, right? And it can make a huge difference, because for most language students, I'm thinking about language students now, they're getting what, 2-3 hours a week, depending on the situation and things. So, if you start watching videos or reading in your target language for half an hour a day, you're going to jump from 2-3 hours of exposure to the language to 5-6, and that's going to speed up the process, as long as it's comprehensible, of course. Because again, when we're talking about exposure to the language, we mean comprehensible input, right?
Yeah, because it takes so many hours to become proficient in the language. So anything you can do to add on those hours beyond your classroom time and have it be comprehensible, it's only going to help you.
Right. Yeah, because I teach adults, so I've had some students that, well, some told me right away, like, I just set apart these 2 hours with you a week, but I don't have time for anything else. And others don't tell you, but you can see it. And I'm like, I'm honest with them. Like, I'm happy to teach you for 10 years, but I'm trying to help you learn the language. So if you start reading, and again, if you're starting from scratch as a beginner, we're talking about cartoons or comic books or simple things at the beginning. Right. But it's going to make a difference, because at the end of the day, as long as it's comprehensible, it's all about how much time you're listening and reading, right? So if you're listening to the language or reading for 6 hours a week as opposed to 3, your process is going to be twice as quick, right?
Right, and I think that's
roughly,
yeah, and I think that's a reason why when you're living in the country where that language is spoken, why that seems to quicken the process, because you're constantly surrounded by the language and it's everywhere. So it's instead of having to try to find 30 minutes a day to have some exposure to the language, when you're living there, it's very easy to find more language to help you out. So because you're surrounded by it.
Yeah, wherever you go.
Everywhere you go.
Exactly. Sure.
Yeah.
Right. But I have one final question that I started thinking about when I think it was in Judith's interview, that she told me about a student of hers. I mean, I'm asking teachers about this, because she told me about a student of hers who failed at everything except French because of the way it was taught, because how much he enjoyed it, right? And yeah, I like to ask teachers, can you recall any situation, any kid that either, when you started with the traditional way and he or she hated it, and you saw the difference when you started teaching with comprehensible input, or a student that just doesn't like school and fails off at everything, or he or she doesn't, but you can tell that he or she doesn't want to be there. But once you started with comprehensible input, you saw the difference. Or you have any anecdote like that? Or
yes, absolutely. Like, so many students popped into my head just now when you said that, and I like a few examples. I sometimes get emails from either the administration or someone saying that, as so and so student is failing classes and having trouble in classes, and they're doing a check-in to see how they're doing, and teachers respond like, oh yeah, so and so is failing this, failing that, having a hard time with it, and I respond like, they're doing great in Spanish. They're actively listening, they're doing a great job. That's happened more than once, thanks to comprehensible input and the personalization that happens with CI. That's helped out a lot. Second is, this year I have a student who doesn't really like school, but they say they come to school for Spanish because they like Spanish class, and they're like, it's their favorite class, and that's why they're there. So and again, another comprehensible input win on that one. And then another thing is, with past couple of years have been so crazy. A lot of teachers, not just in my school, but nationwide, maybe even worldwide, have a lot of students with behavioral issues. And there's, behavior problems and students acting up or, disrupting or, whatnot in classes that didn't happen as often as before. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know. I don't have any behavior issues. Students are fantastic, and they're engaged and they're listening and they're participating. Whether that means, for me, participation can be just sitting there and listening, or it can be actually responding to questions more than just nodding the head or doing that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have any behavior issues, and that's another comprehensible input win. And the connections that we make with our students, because we get to find out all kinds of things about them, and have those great rapports with students, and make those connections that other subjects or would not, or either would be harder to do that or just can't quite do that in other subjects. And so in my classes, it's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. These students are awesome, and it's been I haven't had any issues, knock on wood, now that I say that, but there's been definitely more than one occasion and more than one student that in that case. And the traditional, I remember when it was either because I was a new teacher or because I was teaching traditionally, or a combo of both, probably a combo, that I did have behavior issues and, had to send kids to the office and like all kinds of stuff. And then when I switched to CI, and those diminished, and those problems decreased like tremendously. And I don't have those issues anymore. And that doesn't mean, like, I'm not saying it's not because of me, really. I mean, maybe a little bit, but it's not like because of who this isn't being like snobby. It's because of the way I teach with the comprehensible input and using students. So that's the way, that's the main reason why.
Yeah, they can feel that you care about them. It's that simple.
Yes, like, right. Like I start every class and ask how you're doing, or what did you do this weekend? How are you? Like, what's going on? I don't know how many other classes do that. And just a basic check-in, and obviously I do that because it's interaction, it's interpersonal communication. It's good for language learning and acquiring the language, but also just to see how people are doing, and make those connections. So, I feel lucky that I'm able to do that, and that I'm in that situation.
What a crazy idea to ask people how they're doing, right?
I know, but they're like, well, a teacher who cares about us and how we're doing and what we did this weekend. Whoa. Yeah, I know.
But,
I know.
I was thinking about the second case you talked about, that you said people like students hating school, but they were only happy to come to Spanish, right? Or they were just coming to school because of Spanish. But it's funny because they're actually interested in what you guys are talking about, but because it happens to be in Spanish, they connect Spanish with fun, right?
Yeah.
And that's my point, the earlier point about the subject. And you can do that with any subject, I'm convinced.
Right.
And
Right.
not just subjects, but education and curiosity overall. You know what I mean? Like, even students that don't seem to be interested, if they treat it that way, or if they connect, education with having fun, which is the way I think about it, by the way, they're just gonna be interested in learning, and not just then, but later on in life. There's a reason why adults don't like to learn about anything, pretty much, right?
Yeah, that's the skill of a great teacher, right? Being able to, no matter what subject you teach, being able to make it fun and compelling, and that's what makes you or makes someone be a great teacher that students will talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I was thinking about my own case. Like, I teach adults, so I don't have behavior issues and things of the nature, but I've been able to see it with several students. Like, I mean, the good thing is, because I'm putting out content and the interviews and so on, people who come to me because they want to learn Spanish, they already know what to expect. So I don't get anybody wanting to learn grammar because they know what I'm going to say, But even then, I've talked about not being able to communicate the way you'd like to, being the main cause of frustration for students, which I think it is. I'm talking adults now, but probably for kids as well. But because of that, even people who understand what I'm talking about, because before we start the classes, I explain, comprehensible input is the way, this is why, and, everything. So we're on the same page and they understand what I'm doing. Again, it's not as long as it seems, because they've already consumed my content for the most part, so they know what to expect. But still, I like to, make sure they understand what we're doing. But even then, even students who really understand that and enjoy the classes, sometimes I can still see the frustration because of not being able to communicate. Mm-hmm. Which, again, I understand, because that's our ultimate goal, right?
Right.
But again, when they finally understand that that's not the way the language mechanism works, right? But they're enjoying every single class, and they can see that they can understand more and more every day, right? It makes a huge difference, and I've seen it in a lot of them, that seeing their frustration in their eyes, like not being able to communicate in the language. And it might be as simple as letting them know that it's okay not to be able to communicate. I mean, it's not just okay, it's actually normal, right? Because for the most part, in traditional grammar classes, obviously, but you're pretty much forced to speak from day one, which it's impossible, first of all, right?
Right.
So I feel like, I don't know, I was going to say 99% of the times, that suffering is unnecessary. Because it has nothing to do with them, which is what you're actually forced to think at the end of the day,
Yeah, no, it's actually very natural and actually anticipated. If you should be making mistakes if you're using the language, like you're taking a risk in speaking or writing in a second language, and if you're not making any mistakes, I'd be more concerned if a student is not making any mistakes at all compared to a student who is making mistakes. Like, I actually want you to make mistakes when you're using a second language. That's how you grow in it, and that's how you become better.
Right. Yeah, because also when I've seen that when you stop caring about making mistakes, you stop focusing on form as well.
Yeah.
Because if you care about those mistakes, you're focusing on form. Is this, did I say this correctly? Did I not? Is it this way? Is it the other way? And yeah, if you stop caring about it, but again, it takes time, because we've all been programmed to learn languages one way, the wrong way, obviously. So
Yeah.
even if you understand it intellectually, it doesn't make sense. It still takes time to sort of um, internalize it, if you will, you know.
Yep.
So yeah, but I think that's one of the most important things that, you know,
Yeah. And
if
that,
if you can communicate the way you like to, it's just how it works, you know, and it's totally okay. And I think that I mean, it definitely works for me, but I think it's going to take a lot of the pressure or the frustration away from the journey, because from the process, because it's just the way it works.
exactly. And that brings back to what you said earlier about making sure it's keeping it fun and compelling. When it's fun like that, you're more comfortable to make those mistakes, and it lowers the affective filter that you might have. And if it's fun, and then you'll be more inclined to, and you might even acquire the language quicker, you know, that way. So in making those mistakes and being able to, yeah, to move up the proficiency ladder.
Yeah, and you're more patient when you're having fun, right?
Oh yes, oh yes, for sure.
If you're not having fun and you're not seeing the results, not because of you, but because of the way it works, uh, you're more likely to give up as well, right? But
Yeah.
if you're having fun, even though you're not seeing the results you'd like to see, again, not because of you, but because of the way it works. And we see it with kids. It takes them some time to start communicating, right? If you're having fun, you're sort of okay with it. I've seen that you're more patient with it.
Yeah, look at like a 2-year-old or even an 8-year-old, and see how much fun they're having. They're having so much fun. They're like, you know, playing around and doing all kinds of. They're not focused on the language. They're focused on having fun, which means that they're subconsciously getting that language in their head. They don't even know it because they're having fun. You know, I don't see too many young kids, like, you know, 3-year-olds that aren't having fun with what they're doing. And you know, every parent wants to make sure that it's fun for their own child, and there you go, that helps with the language acquisition. So
Right.
and that's what we could, you know, try to resemble in a classroom setting or wherever we happen to be teaching language students, in whatever context it might be, to kind of create that fun atmosphere, so that everybody is comfortable and willing to make those mistakes.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why they end up acquiring the language. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and not having the ability to consciously control the process that, like, we're supposed to.
Right. Yeah. Right. And not having that focus on the form, but more focus on the fun and you know, being able to understand it.
Yeah, but again, like a final message, we've pretty much we've all had the same type of education when it comes to languages, and like I said, it takes time to sort of adjust to the new way of doing it, but over time you learn to relax, you learn to take your attention off of form and focus on the message, which is the most important thing. I've seen it in myself, even when watching series, even after I was totally convinced by comprehensible input, I would still find myself watching a series and paying attention to specific words, you know.
Yeah.
But over time, I've learned to relax and to sort of tell myself that it's okay, as long as I understand what's going on, even if I didn't get that specific word, you know. And or I'm reading a book, you know, like an entire book. I just look up 1-2 words in the entire book, and just if I feel like I really need to understand that word in order to understand the message, what's going on, right? So you know, as a message of hope, you learn to relax, and you know, even if you not right now you're thinking that it's not going to happen for me, you know, it is.
Correct. It is. It just takes time, like you said. You know, it takes time. It really does, and it happens at different times for everybody. You know, there's no one set time. No one can tell you that, oh yeah, it's going to take you you know, 1 year to be able to do this. Nope, you can't really say that. But it takes time.
Yeah.
It's different for everybody.
Yeah, you can get estimations, but yeah, but still longer than most people think. That definitely.
Yeah. But with comprehensive input, that can really help facilitate the process.
Yeah, and it's fun, like we said. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The main thing.
Any other thing that we forgot to talk about, or any other thing in your mind, Dustin? Or
I don't think so. Again, I really appreciate you having me on here. It's been awesome to have this conversation, and it's been a great conversation. Lots of awesome things, and no, thank you so much.
You're welcome, and yeah, it's my pleasure as well. Yeah, like I said, I'm enjoying each and every one of these conversations because, even though we have similar ideas, we all have our different resources that we use, or different nuances, or or the way we communicate, or the way we express ourselves that is going to help someone on the other side. Even if it's a similar way, or we're talking about a similar topic, because of the way you articulate it, or it might help someone, and that's the goal.
Perfect. Yeah, excellent. You're absolutely right.
All right, Dustin. So thanks so much, and have a good day.
Thank you so much, Alvaro.
Bye-bye.
See ya.